And pretty much all of the Western companies have been, even if from a European perspective, they could go and trade with Iran, they were afraid of the secondary effect of American sanctions. And so they haven't. And the Iranian economy is in a shambles because of the sanctions and simply because of gross economic mismanagement by Iran itself.
I like you're about as close as we can get to a profit right now on the topic. So let's just try to find out what's going to
You
happen
know
and
the
what's going to be
expression,
in.
the gift of prophecy ended in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, well, it's either you or I'm gonna have to ask GPT, and I much prefer to ask you. So
Okay.
please, the experts got to tell me there's going to become a huge vacuum in the region, right? Or there already is one that's growing. So how does the vacuum get filled, practically speaking, by the other nations in the region?
Okay. Well, first of all, the war is maybe still in its early stages. I don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know yet what the real outcome is. We had a very successful opening day or two. We've had a successful ongoing campaign, but we don't know what the long-term effect of this is. If the war were to end today, then we could say that maybe Israel postponed the nuclear program by about a half a year and significantly downgraded the ballistic missile arsenal, but they still have a very significant piece of it. So that's where we are today. Now, fast forward a couple of few weeks from now, does this turn into an Israel bombs? Well, Israel succeeds in destroying Fordo, which is the main nuclear site, and everyone thinks that Israel does not have the capability to do this one because it's a big mountain that the Iranians built a many, many meters thick reinforced concrete bunker in which they built an enrichment plant that everybody thinks that only the U.S. can take that out. Is Fordo there or not? Whether we do it, whether the U.S. does it in the next few weeks.
Can we even do it, by the way? Why? It has to do with just like general, like international laws around the power of certain types of weapons that just simply couldn't, like they're not allowed to be in possession by other countries or something.
I mean, look, it's a huge 6 kilometer square complex, and it's this mountain. And only the U.S. would build a special, it's not a bunker buster, it's a mountain buster. Most people don't think that Israel can cause more than minimal damage to Fordo. So that's one big question mark. Will the regime, this won't be in the next couple of weeks, will it be destabilized or not? How badly will we be hit? Who's going to end up winning this war? And let's say in hopeful analysis that we do, and Iran ends the war greatly weakened, then there is something of a power vacuum that, as you were indicating. And then who fills it? Well, the Sunni states, the Gulf states, Turkey, not a friend of ours today. And a lot of people are afraid in the Arab world, of course, that Israel will be a dominant regional player, maybe even a regional hegemon. I think that's greatly overstating it. We're a bit too small to be a hegemon. But yes, if Iran is greatly weakened, then the two big and powerful players left are Israel and Turkey. And of course, the Saudis, the Emiratis in the economic and partly in the diplomatic realm.
Iran, it's a silly question, but how does Iran actually ship the oil to the rest of the world? Is it going through a pipe or is it going through freighters?
Most of their exports, I mean, there are lots of pipelines in Iran itself, but most of the exports go through the Persian Gulf. And today, almost all of it is bought by China because of the American sanctions. The Indians probably are buying some, maybe South Korea, but it's overwhelmingly to China.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I recently read that both China and Russia offered to mediate between Israel and Iran. China is supposed to be kind of global power that, because for thousands of years it has survived by kind of recluding itself from the rest of the world's involvement in these kinds of military campaigns. On the other hand, we can see that China is, like you said, it's the one that's buying all the oil from Iran. And we saw that an Iran oil field was hit, and that may actually lead to some kind of strain on China. For China, as one example, to get involved and try to mediate between Israel and Iran, what would the possible interests that they hold be, and how or why would they want to get involved for their own reasons?
Well, I think you said why they would want for their own reasons, because they want to ensure that the oil flows. Okay. China isn't a big military or diplomatic player in the Middle East. It's a very big economic player because of its oil purchases. I said it buys most of Iran's oil. It buys a very large part of the Saudis and I presume some of the others' oil. So they're a big economic player here. And so they have major interests at stake in what's going on in the Mideast. But I wouldn't spend too much time on this because there isn't a chance in the million that Israel will agree to have China as a mediator. It's not a disinterested party. It's an ally of Iran's. And we're in the American camp. Either the U.S. will mediate, or if the U.S. gets directly involved, it may ask the Europeans to intervene and mediate on its behalf. But we'll be going through the U.S. and maybe Europe, not through Russia or China.
I think it's interesting to see how that translates into recently the president spoke about how he wants to bring production back into the US and how that's now it looks to be a trend just across the world and avoiding outsourcing the creation of products. And if the prices of fuel go up, if China isn't able to produce for this at the same pricing with the same at the same competitive angle that it's been doing, would that end up pushing these other economies to become more self-sufficient faster? And that's part of what I'm trying to understand. The other piece of it is, will we end up with a supply shortage because companies or let's say the major manufacturers are going to refuse to actually produce since it's going to cost them too much, it's not going to be worth it for them? Like, can we see the kind of trends for supply shortages and price hikes already?
So you're talking shortages for the global economy or for the regional actors?
I would say global because, for example, if we look at China just as a global player for its production, it's manufacturing so much of the parts of things that we need. It can have a massive impact if China's not able to produce at the same pricing.
Absolutely. But you're getting it into an area which isn't my area of expertise. So I'll leave it
Fascinating.
to others who are wiser than I am.
Fascinating. So then we could tie right back into something else.